Welcome back to Save It for the Pod. Gotta be quicker than that.
Welcome back to another episode of
Save It for the
Pod.
with Alex and Lindsey.
Oh, shoot. I forgot all about that. And I'm Alex.
And I'm Lindsey.
What book did we read this week?
We read Golden Sun by Pierce Brown.
The second book in the Red Rising trilogy.
Alex, how long did you have to save it for the pod?
I finished it just before midnight last night, so it's been about 13 hours and 50 minutes.
I finished it like 5 minutes ago, so I didn't have to save it for very long.
Although you seem pretty jazzed to talk about it right now.
Well, it's fresh on the mind.
Indeed. Should we give a quick spoiler warning?
Yes. As we do, we will be spoiling everything that happens.
Everything. And potentially, based on the accuracy of some of our predictions from the previous book, we might even be spoiling things that will happen in the next one.
Perhaps. You've been warned.
We left off in Red Rising, where he had just won the academy and started to work for his love interest's father and his rival's father, Nero Augustus. And we get a little bit of a time skip. He's competing against Cassius's brother, and he loses. And basically, this is a pretty big loss. And then from there, Augustus says, I'm giving up your contract, and you are nothing to me, basically. And Darrow is pretty bummed. He's like, have I done all this for nothing? Have I lost everything? And so he runs into the Sons of Ares, and he decides, okay, this is my chance to be a terrorist. And right before he is going to blow up all these people who are joined together for this gala, he decides, no, I will instead create a civil war. And he challenges Cassius to a duel, beats him, but doesn't kill him. The duel is interrupted by the sovereign. And so we begin to see that the sovereign is playing a game that is above all the other games that are being played, and Darrow is now in the midst of it. And instead of joining the sovereign, he rebels against the sovereign and creates a little bit of a civil war. He gets the former Rage Knight, who has been teaching him a particular form in their martial arts in secret over the past few years, to join his army, and then they eventually gather up their allies and attack Mars, where the sovereign is. And they conquer Mars, but not before Ares' identity is revealed. This whole time, it has been Severo's father, Fitchner, who has been working his own long game against the sovereign this entire time. After that particular battle is over, Darrow brings Mustang back to his home as a low red, and it is there he gives her the video to watch his carving and either accept him or reject him. And it gives the impression that she may have rejected him. And after a parade, he goes back to a private party that is hosted by everyone's favorite person, the Jackal. And the Jackal has actually turned on Darrow.
Surprise, surprise.
And is actually working with the sovereign. And Fitchner is killed. Lorne, the former Rage Knight, is killed. Very importantly, Augustus, Mustang's father, Jackal's father, is killed by the Jackal. And we don't know what happens to Darrow at this point. It's a bit of a cliffhanger. Oh, should I say Darrow? My bad. That's where we leave off. Darrow paralyzed in the hands of his enemies, with a lot of his allies being killed, and his former best friend Roque is the betrayer.
That about sums it up.
What lesson do you feel like Darrow learned this book? Was there a lesson?
The first 100 pages-ish, the first quarter of this book, we have Darrow seeming to ping pong through different lessons. One moment he's thinking, we can't just attack the golds, we can't just do terrorist threats and actions to make the society better. The next, he runs into some of who he thinks are part of the Sons of Ares for the first time since he was carved. And they're very much radicals and are very angry, rightfully so, with the Golds, but they're the ones pushing the terrorist bombing attacks that are going on. And they try to get him to help them carry that out as well and tell him what Io said right before she was hung, which was that she was with child. So that was the big secret that she told her sister, but we never knew what it was. I think that was one of our guesses.
It was.
So they share this with him, which obviously makes him devastated, angry, not in his right mind. And then he comes around to their way of thinking like, oh, I've been a Gold for too long now. He specifically says, as I'm reminded of the true horrors our kind face, had I really forgotten? I am a child of hell and I've spent too long in their heaven. In his heartbreak and anger, he has this shift where he's like, oh no, they're right. We need to make them pay. So he's going to carry out their request that he bomb the gala of all of the Gold leaders, the sovereign, that he's going to be at in 1 or 2 days. And so then he gets to that and he changes his mind. He chooses to stir up a civil war instead. So that is a moment we get to after 100 pages of him kind of flip-flopping, not sure what he should do. But then he decides, instead of being other people's pawns, he's going to do what he feels is the right path forward, use his own judgment, trust his own judgment. And so that's what he does. We come to find out that the sovereign was planning to allow the Bolognas to completely wipe out Augustus and his clan at this gala. But Darrow sparks the duel challenge with Cassius before this can play out. I feel like one thing he learned is he does not need to wait for orders from the Sons of Ares. He does not need to be a pawn to others and should instead have confidence based on his judgment, his own leadership, his own will. So we see him grow like that, at least. What else did you see?
Yeah, I felt like we rehashed some of the conversations that we had in the last book. There was one conversation in the first book where Darrow's first time through the Institute before he duels Cassius, he's kind of using people and not really connecting with people. And the second time through, he remembers the importance of connection because people know when they feel like they're being used as tools. And one thing we see constantly in this book is the distance he feels from the other Golds and the way he holds them at arm's length. And that recreates that conversation a little bit, specifically with Roque. And he initially, when he decides he's going to be a terrorist, he uses a sedative on Roque to keep him unconscious and avoid a lot of the bloodshed. And then from Roque's perspective, because he wasn't there, Roque's love interest gets mortally wounded and eventually dies. And so that already is a bit of a chasm between the two of them. And we just constantly see all these people that Darrow used to really connect with in the first book, really held at an arm's length. That's Mustang, that's Roque, that's Tactus, Severo even a little bit. And instead of building relationships with them, we have a slew of new characters that he is building relationships with. And the characters from the first book become a little bit more flat or they turn against him. And those relationships with the Golds is kind of his lesson, because what he's wrestling with is everyone is human, but he's scared to let the type of human he is, where his family is from, be known. He's scared to admit that he's a red to all these people because he knows what it's like to be a Gold and he knows the prejudices they have. And Severo comes to a head with him at some point and is like, hey, I've followed you all this way. If you can't put yourself out there for me, what do we have? And so that's when Darrow reveals to Severo his true identity. And Severo's like, yeah, I know. Because Ares came to Severo before and let him know who Darrow was and how he was going to serve him. But he can't share that type of information to the people he cares the most about. He can't seem to share it with Mustang until much later, until everything's over. And he certainly couldn't share it with Roque because Roque betrays him. And in Roque's betrayal, we see the prejudice that was there that I don't know. I'm not necessarily sold that it would have been there had their relationship been maintained. I felt like Roque was hurt, and as a result of his hurt, lashed out with that type of prejudice.
That's a possibility, because everything's a possibility until it's given a chance to be tested, of course. But there are Golds who followed Darrow, who would be a friend of Darrow's, who were loyal. At least one clear example of it stops whenever it becomes about other colors too.
That's true.
So the example I'm thinking of is one of the wolf pack. During the battle to take Mars, Darrow puts a razor in the hands of his obsidian Ragnar in front of the wolf pack, the rest of the people with them. And one of them protests this pretty severely. And it's just like, what are you doing? That's not allowed. That is only for Golds. And Darrow says, you remember the Institute. You remember how I bleed for those who follow me, how I do not take the allegiance of slaves. Why are you surprised by this? Because it is real? But he knows internally that while she'll go along with it right now, because Severo's going along with it, in the moment she'll be like, okay, fine. He knows that he has lost her.
Right.
And that stuck out to me as there are a lot of Golds who might be drawn to Darrow because he's different, because he shows them a way that they don't recognize, and they're okay with his mercy when it's for them, but that stops. They're not okay with it when it's for others. So mercy for me, but not for thee. It makes sense that there might be a lot of people who could fall into that category. So I do think it's possible that Roque is one of those people, regardless of had Darrow been better able to mend the friendship. But we will never know.
Yeah, that's true. The reason I think Roque will come to regret it is because they took from the story of Jesus of Nazareth and had him reenact Judas, who betrayed Jesus in that story. And he betrays him with a kiss and then turns him over, and which is almost essentially what happened, except I think Roque kissed him on 2 occasions. The first one I was like, okay, so that is our check from Pierce, who has consistently used Judeo-Christian allusion that Roque is going to betray him. And so if you follow the story of Judas, he regrets it. And then eventually, depending on if you are just in the Christian canon, he kills himself.
I felt like this betrayal was coming for most of the book because it was foreshadowed so heavily, not just with a very clear reference to like the kiss of betrayal, but just the bitterness and the chasm that formed between them after Darrow had sedated Roque so he wouldn't be at the gala, and then Roque's love interest died. I wrote down, because I had already suspected, on page 282, I wrote, I think Roque will betray Darrow due to his bitterness towards him. If that ends up being true, this page is interesting. That's the page where Augustus's council is questioning if they can trust Victra because her mother betrayed Augustus and was working with the sovereign. And Roque stands up for Victra in this scene, and he's like, it seems we're being unfair, hypocritical even. And he talks about like all the reasons why his family is completely untrustworthy, but that they're not questioning his loyalty. He's like, why do we doubt Victra? Like, she's remained steadfast to Darrow since the academy. And he says, you disgust me. It makes me sad to be among you bickerers. So if another man or woman questions her loyalty, I will lose faith in this fellowship and I will leave. So he stands up for her, but I just found it interesting since I was already suspicious of where this was heading.
Right.
That he would be like, Yet none of you question my loyalty, as if he almost was like,
Offended?
yeah, like it's almost a slip up.
Almost like he's whining about like, this is so unfair. They don't think I'm capable of being better or playing the game as well as everyone else.
It just struck me as an interesting page. Oh, and then near the end, there's a conversation between Darrow and Roque that gets interrupted, so they don't get to finish it. But he asks Darrow, like, why do you think I got drafted to House Mars? And it's open-ended. We still maybe want the full answer to that, but I guess what we see is that there are more layers to this person and how they think and what motivates them. It's kind of like the Hogwarts house debate, where it's like some people could seem like they should belong in a certain house, but then that's not the one that they're in, and it has a lot more to do with what motivates you than what maybe you appear to be on the surface. It's like a Hermione being a Gryffindor instead of a Ravenclaw. What multitudes does Roque contain that would make him a fit for House Mars whenever he just seems like a philosopher, kind of scholarly type?
Yeah, I think the great irony in Darrow trying to learn what it's like to trust these people and share this belief that he is just like them, he is human, even if he's red, is that he kind of dehumanized all these people he pushed away in some way. And like Roque was obviously the most offended and the most willing to turn on him for it. I do think it was more difficult with the people he'd known longer because they always felt at a distance to him. Mustang, Roque, Severo, all these people, they were always gold to him. And I think inherently, whether he realizes it or not, he has a certain amount of prejudice against golds that he doesn't hold with the other low colors. And I think we see that in the way he treats low colors, where he is quicker to reveal who he is to low colors. I think I'm all but convinced that Orion knows, the blue who commanded the ship Pax after he took it. And obviously Ragnar knows.
When he tells the low colors, the ones that are treated the most like slaves, the ones that are the most apparently slaves, he is calling them into full humanity and freedom, to not be slaves, but to be people.
Yes.
But when he tells golds, he's calling them to set aside privilege that they hold, to treat others as fully free people.
Right. And I think it's always easier to build someone up than it is to ask someone to give something up that they've taken away. That really is the struggle that he's coming to find, is he knows that if these people didn't have to give up anything, they would be for it. But because so much of their worth and value is built on the belief that they are so much better than all these low colors, they would be against it.
I remember whenever Darrow tells Fitchner and Severo, like, I need to tell Mustang, I don't want to hide this from her. And they're like, dude, no, you can't. And he is like, if I can't tell Mustang, then none of this even matters, because for this to work, golds like Mustang have to be able to see and choose this different path forward. And they're like, dude, no, like, she may have these nice sounding ideals when it's all just that floating up in the clouds as ideals. But at the end of the day, she is like the princess of golds. She won't actually want things to truly change and have all these low colors come and try to take her castle. Think about who this is. And he's like, well, I have to, otherwise all of this is for nothing. One thing I feel like he decides is Mustang is not a distraction for him from his goal. She is the goal. People like her building a world for people with good hearts and a better path forward for all of humanity is what this is all for, including gold. And that's why he's like, if I can't tell her this, if she would turn on us knowing that I'm a red, then this is all for nothing anyway. Which maybe that's naive, but that is what he comes to believe.
We're talking a lot about Mustang, and she has mentioned throughout the whole book about various studies of low colors. And as I was reading this, I was like, wait a second. Is she trying to butter him up to tell her? Or is this just like an interest of hers? And obviously that was answered by the end.
Right. And now, see, that was all when it was ideals and she was securely the pretty princess of the golds up in her ivory tower. And now it's being put to the test because the person she loves is a red. And so these studies that look at how there have been multiple occasions of people of different colors, like golds with reds or different in between colors, trying to alter themselves so that they can be with and have children with people of different colors. And she thinks it's beautiful. She's like, the human spirit tries to break free again and again, not in hate like the Dark Revolt, but for love. They don't mimic each other. They aren't inspired by others who come before them because they don't know, because the history's erased. Each is willing to take the leap thinking they are the first. That's bravery, and that means it's part of who we are as people. So she's very inspired by all these histories of these people doing this. And now it's put to the ultimate test of, okay, princess, now you're faced with the reality that the person you love is actually a red. What are you going to do about it? You know, do you still think it's beautiful and brave and something to admire? I think Rubber has met the road, and it's a cliffhanger. Like, we don't know what she will do.
So what do you think she'll do?
I think Mustang always surprises us in the best way. So I am expecting no different here. I do think that she will try to help Darrow in the next book. I think it was a lot for her to process because there was this whole aspect to him that she never knew. That's hard to find out about someone that you love. But like, whenever he takes her in front of his old home in the mining community that he grew up in, he says, you wanted me to let you in. How far do you want to go? And she says, like, all the way. But she had to have a growing suspicion of where this was headed as he like took her in front of some random house that he knew the way to down in a low red mining community, right? She's a smart person. She's proclaimed herself a genius in this book, and it's true. I think that she will come around to it. I think she just needed time. And honestly, her needing time to process was an excellent plot device to prevent her from being killed by the betrayal of the Jackal and Rogue. So maybe she'll be one of the things that helps save Darrow next book.
I have no doubt in my mind that she'll be Team Darrow next book. Really, it was just a matter of time. I think the harder part was the fact that her dad killed his wife and child. And I think that is something you have to reckon with ahead of time.
It's not easy to fully confront privilege that you have or confront evil that your family has carried out. People that you love has carried out upon other people. That's a lot to reshuffle in terms of your identity and worldview. So her needing time makes some sense.
It does. The other person I think who we see go through a huge cultural shift is Ragnar, who I think was probably my favorite character this book.
Really?
Yeah, I really enjoyed Ragnar. Every page he was on, him wrestling with what he's been taught versus what he can see with his own eyes. Because what he has to give up is so much more, I think, than what Mustang has to give up. Because what he has to give up is how pointless all the suffering was. And how the life he lived wasn't actually for his good. It was just a way to keep him down. That is so devastating because that's him giving up his culture to be his own man.
Everything he's ever believed for his own survival.
Right. Mustang already believes these things theoretically and just hasn't put it into practice for whatever reason. But Ragnar, he sees God come to the ship. He comes up to God and says, I will serve you all of my life. I am your tool, whatever you want. And God says, excellent. I accept your sacrifice. I accept your life. And then God comes to him later and says, I reject you. I want you to be God. And it is such an interesting philosophical conversation that Pierce is having, because that is the story of the serpent in the garden of, I want you to determine what good and evil is. I want you to be free. Now Ragnar is capable of making the wrong decision, and it's his fault. He's capable of making the right decision, and it's his fault. But no longer can he just be a slave to someone else. That is just such an interesting conversation where this is an instance. Darrow is the Christ figure to Ragnar, but from the Gold's perspective, he is Satan. And so he is playing both sides of that third book title, Morning Star, right off the bat, because that's what he is. He is someone who brings freedom to people, but at the same time, it's taking power away from people. And so it's both. That is what Christianity did in the Roman Empire. It took power away from those in power, and it gave power to those who had none. And that is an equalizing and averaging that those in power obviously are going to call satanic.
Yes. The experience we watch Ragnar have, which is very opposed to this offer of freedom at first. He's like, why are you doing this to me? Like, why do you shame me like this? It kind of like breaks his brain a little bit.
Yeah.
That experience, which is very hard to experience, we see whenever Darrow is talking to his mother when he goes to visit his old home. That is what she tells him to. She's like, you're trying to do all this, huh? Like, what do you think it's going to do to the, you say, billion reds that are apparently mining under the surface of Mars whenever they learn that their entire life and their entire purpose is a lie? These people, what are they going to do? Are they going to go to the surface? Where are they going to live? What are they going to do? They're miners. They're going to still be miners. They just won't have a purpose anymore and won't feel like they're doing something for a greater good. Like, have you considered this? That's her fear too, is what does it do to people whenever you take away this bedrock of their identity?
Right. Do you agree with her? Because I don't think what she's saying is so different than what Augustus says, where he talks about planning for humanity to ascend past this solar system and to be something permanent in the universe. And he believes that people are capable of doing all these things, but that doesn't mean they should. Instead, they should let a select few rule and make sure that will is maintained. And he points to modernity and says, look, they used up all their resources. They got obsessed with just consuming and didn't live a world that was beneficial to the species.
Yes, his perspective is that we keep this rigid order so that the society is maintained and it has a forward direction as a species. Darrow's mother's concern is you take people who their entire lives, they're taught how to do one thing, mine, or whatever their task is. That's where they get their sense of purpose as well. The entire fabric of their little community is built around. If you were to take that away from people who this is all they know, what will that do to them? So I think it's a little bit different, because I think that anyone is not necessarily a blank slate, but kind of a blank slate at birth if you don't funnel them into a very rigid one way of life, one identity. They could be anything.
Right.
I think she's right that there are a lot of people who may not be able to survive that or to be able to embrace that, because that is a very huge internal shattering. And can everyone remake themselves after the shattering? That's a real thing to be concerned about. So I think it's a little bit different. So I'm not saying I agree with Augustus's vision, and I'm not saying that everyone would not be able to cope and remake themselves. But I do think the mother is correct that there are a lot of people that might be too much.
Yeah, and I think you said something just now that is important, where you said, like, when people are shaped into the society from birth, that would give the impression that even the philosophy that you're talking about would say, like, so stop shaping people at birth.
Yes.
But I think his mom would say, don't change anything.
Oh, really?
I do.
Huh. See, I thought her concern was more so about all the people who are already in the system.
Maybe you're right. I just feel like that, and because of that, we shouldn't change anything, is a mentality. And it's a mentality that is what Augustus needs to maintain power.
This is slightly related based on Augustus's vision that whenever people aren't given order and a strict, very limited identity and purpose, they become just pleasure-seeking, aimless, not working towards the greater good of the species. And I find the irony there is that which of the colors could that most closely apply to? It's the golds, because even though he's like, no, this color system is what saves humanity, the irony is that the golds, there are tons of golds who are either like pixies or just chase after pleasure. They don't really contribute to society. And why? Perhaps because they are the most free to do so. I do find that funny that modernity is kind of playing out in the golds, if not any other color. And it's kind of rich for like Augustus, a gold, to look at all the colors who are oppressed and enslaved and forced into these narrow buckets and be like, we have to maintain this, whenever the golds just have this level of privilege that the others don't have. We've talked a lot between these two books about how none of the colors are free. And that is true, but the golds are certainly the most free.
Yes. And even more so, it's like, why does our modern culture and why do the golds culture support such a consumeristic tendency? It's to line the pockets of those in power. It's actually the power structures and system itself that is creating this issue. It's not humans in their nature. It's just that human nature can be manipulated in such a way that this happens, because there are instances in human cultures across history that are far more in tune with nature, far less consumeristic. Native cultures, certain religious cultures, some Eastern cultures. There's a lot of cultures that shame such greed and such waste. But you're right, the gold culture is extremely wasteful of human life even.
What does it do to the golds whenever their purpose in the order of things is to shepherd the rest of the colors, to rule them? But a lot of the golds aren't born to be rulers, so they have no purpose.
And in fact, probably feel bad about themselves because of it, and such are probably dealing with these failed expectations by pleasures.
Right.
And is that not the story of Tactus? He feels like he's living in someone's shadow. He's constantly talking about all these live fast, die young, all these things. But what he really wants is to learn to be content with himself. It's just the culture makes him feel like he can't.
Right. Exactly. It's like, because some golds were probably born and the thing they could have done might look like something another color has been relegated to do. So they can't do that. Same for the other colors, but with the other colors, some are actual slaves, some are like middle class, if you will. Their futures are very, very narrowly shaped. And they're even biologically, and the way that they are brought up, it's like very narrowly shaped. And so they have less freedom, less Maslow's hierarchy being met, to where they probably don't even have the luxury to think about what they might actually want to be. Whereas the golds exist in a world where they have the privilege and luxury to start thinking like, what am I good at? Who am I? What do I want to do? But then if they're not rulers, if they're not the strongest, if they're not the smartest, if they're not the most cruel, they kind of get grouped into these degrading categories, and they can never find a purpose that actually feels like a good fit. That's why in the golds you see the modernity problem occur, whereas the other colors don't really have the time, space, or energy to reach that problem.
So you're saying like it is a product of having opportunity and then being told you have to meet a certain degree to be successful that creates this tendency to just consume to cope.
Well, it's like they're treated more like people in a way than the other colors are. They get a full education and they never go hungry, and they can explore things. If they're really into learning, they can read anything they want to get their hands on. If they're maybe small and not as built like a warrior, they can train in martial arts like Julian. I feel like they just have more opportunities that could make them more self-actualized humans, rather than when you're just a blue or a pink or brown and your humanity is never recognized. You are just a cog.
You don't have freedom.
You don't have any freedom at all. And so while the golds get indoctrinated in their very gold way of things, it feels like they also just have so much more opportunity and are treated more like people as they grow up.
How do you think the jackal found out?
Or was it Roque that found out?
How do you think Roque found out?
If I were to make a prediction, it was heavily foreshadowed that the jackal would betray the whole time. Mustang constantly warned Darrow, don't trust my brother. You need to stop having an alliance with my brother. So the jackal was always going to betray Darrow, I think. I think it was an example of, especially knowing that Pierce draws from Judeo-Christian stories and Roque is taking on the betrayer Judas character in this. I feel like that makes the jackal like the Jewish synagogue, like the Jewish rulers that Roque betrayed him to. If I were to make a prediction, it would be that Roque found out and then aligned with the jackal, but I could be wrong. And I don't know how he found out. That is my question.
I think if anything gave it away is when he woke up and said, Uncle Naro. They were like, Uncle Naro? Who's Naro?
I thought that was what he said to Fitchner.
Yeah, but that's all recorded.
Oh.
Because Jackal was using that as propaganda. And then I wonder if he somehow got a hold of the unedited footage.
You make a good point that if it was recorded whenever Fitchner goes up to Darrow and instead of executing him, turns on the sovereign, that could just look like he chose Team Augustus. But the things he says to Darrow are kind of strange.
Because I think he calls him Ares.
I don't think so.
Was that all just in his mind?
I think so. Fitchner says out loud to Darrow, you bloody damn fool. So he uses the red slang. And he says, I had it under control. And Darrow's like, what? And he's like, it's me. It's always been me. So he doesn't say he's Ares, but I think using the slang. So if that was being recorded, then maybe that's how the jackal found out. And maybe he told Roque.
I was kind of bummed Fitchner died.
Yeah. It was like we find out he's Ares and then he's dead in 2 chapters.
Yeah.
I did think, kind of in line with our discussion about what Darrow bringing freedom means for the low colors and like what they have to internally overcome to accept that and to join that cause versus what it means for the privileged golds and some of the higher colors. Whenever Fitchner is talking about, like, we found out he's Ares, he's talking to Darrow about his vision, and he says that he always knew a gold couldn't lead the rebellion. It has to be from the bottom up. Red is about family more than any other color. It is about love amid all the horror of the world. If red rises, they have a chance to bind the worlds together. Mid colors won't. Pinks, browns can't. Obsidians have failed before, and if they succeeded alone, they'd break the worlds instead of freeing them. So Fitchner, as Ares, believes that it's only the reds that can cause a different world to emerge because of the way that they're brought up. The identity formation that society has given the reds actually gives them the best shot at being people who are capable of love and true connection and this like internal power from actually having close love and family connection, whereas so many of the other colors, like the pinks and the browns and the obsidians, are very stripped of all connection and humanity.
That's a result of what their purposes are, where pinks, browns, and obsidians are all more so tools for golds, where reds, they are tools, but they have to live long enough to pay off the investment. They give them a semblance of family, a semblance of life and hope, so that they can benefit the golds.
Right. And I thought it was interesting him saying essentially that like these other very enslaved colors don't have the capacity to do this, to lead a rebellion. The mid colors simply won't. Because whenever you're in the middle, you do benefit still. You have some benefit that the others don't have. And sometimes that causes people to want to hold on to even the little scraps that they have that get above other people.
Right. The best thing a government can do to prevent any sort of uprising is maintain a robust middle class.
Bingo.
Do you agree with what he's saying?
I think I do. It's really an interesting discussion that this brings up just when applied into the real world, because it's really talking about how none of us are free if the people at the bottom are not free, that a society is only as good as how the people at the lowest level of it are treated. If you look at different movements that have occurred in our world, the feminist movement, the civil rights movement, and it's like, I agree with the perspective that if you want more rights for women, you should also want more rights for any other group that's oppressed too.
Yeah, Timothy Snyder put it like this: freedom is not something an individual has. It's something that we collectively carry. So if one person has it taken away, that means none of us are actually carrying it, and it just becomes a privilege, and all privileges can be revoked.
Right, because it relies on someone to give it to you, but if they can give it to you, they can take it away from you as well. For there to be true freedom, justice, equality, equity across a society, it has to be for everybody.
Your point is essentially that if the lowest don't have it, no one actually has it. It's just bait.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a good interpretation of what Fitchner was saying. I really hope Fitchner was actually just wrong, because I have a lot of faith in Ragnar. And the way Ragnar stood in contrast by becoming his own person, he no longer agrees with everything that Darrow says. I also don't think good uprisings in this society can only come from red, because what Ragnar does when he disagrees with Darrow on how to handle Mustang in the end, and he does something that I've been waiting for Darrow to do this whole time, which is show true strength through just pure nonviolent submission. That is an obsidian truly breaking the world, because if he fights, Mustang feels justified in killing him, but he does something completely different, which is saying, I am more powerful than you. No doubt I could kill you, but my freedom is in my restraint. And I need you to not be forced to do this thing. But I can see how you agreeing with Darrow here is very important to this person that I am in partnership with. It's interesting that Fitchner believes red to be the lowest and the reds view the obsidians to be the lowest. Well, at least Darrow does. And this obsidian took what Darrow's power and suffering, he took it to the most extreme, which is he's not even going to fight. He is simply going to say, this is not a test of my will, but whether or not you are true. And I will lay down my life to prove that you are or aren't true.
Yeah, that was definitely moving. And because her perception of Obsidian is, yeah, like, show me who you really are. The dog that just fights.
Fitchner only uses it pronouns for them, not even human.
For Ragnar to do the opposite of what in their minds is the only thing he can do is a big perspective shift.
Yeah.
I do feel like we read Fitchner's comment about who could lead the society, who could lead the rebellion differently. He thinks it could only come from a red. He's talking about who could lead the rebellion, and he feels like it has to come from a red. And I read that as because red is about love amid all the horror in our world. It's almost that reds are conditioned to be able to live with more nuance than some of the other colors.
To trust these people.
And to like look for the goodness in others and to have mercy and to actually know what love even feels like because they have had that in strong family bonds.
Yeah.
And so they're able to then give that to the world. You can't give what you yourself do not know.
And if that's the case, I would probably say he might be right because I think Ragnar could only do that.
Because a red gave it to him.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why I slightly disagreed.
That's an excellent point.
And the other reason was because, again, if a mid-color rebelled against the society, there's a very real possibility that all the billions of slaves below the surface would be entirely left out or forgotten about. So
Right.
it almost has to come from the very bottom. So that way everyone's free, not just some.
All right, Lindsey, what was your cry count?
My cry count was 1.
Ooh, what's the one?
So for me, it was the scene with Darrow and his mother.
Yes.
Very specifically, whenever they're talking about EO.
Really?
Yes. Because somebody finally said what I have been feeling since book 1.
Okay. Okay.
And so that was emotional for me because his mother, first of all, immediately recognizes him, even though he's like 2 feet taller, huge, gold, just very physically different than the boy she would have last seen. And she just knows it's him. So that's a mom for you, I guess, like instantly recognizing a child. But they're talking about EO, and she says, I never liked EO, not for you. She could be manipulative. And he's like, Mom, like, I know that about the baby, like, you know, I already know about that. And she just is like, I always feared she would make you fight her battles. And I always feared how much she liked to fight. And he's like, well, but Mom, like, she was right. Like, she was right about the gold. She was right about all of it. And his mom's like, I'm your mother. I don't care about what's right. I care about you, child.
Yeah.
And this was like the feeling I just had under the surface all last book, where it was like EO had all these things she was trying to push Darrow to. But like, was that right of her? Like, that's a lot to put on his shoulders. And I know that the stakes are so high, and I know that their people are enslaved, but he's like a 16-year-old boy, like, man, I guess technically, but I mean, he's a teenager. Like, this is a lot, you know? He loves EO, but he does kind of wrestle with what she placed on him, the decision she made, while he is devastated that what the society took from him, the opportunity to have a family, when he finds out that she was pregnant when she died. He also is like, and she knew she was pregnant and made the choice to sing the song. This was also something she chose, but it's also because the society is terrible. So he doesn't necessarily blame her. But I think hearing the mom, Like, you always kind of know it's not a great sign if the parents don't like your partner because they're like fearful that your partner doesn't love you more than other ulterior causes or like other things. And it sounds like that is how the mom felt. So it just made me feel emotional that the adult in Darrow's life, his parent that was still alive, shared my same concerns because like she just loves her child more than the greater good or the bigger cause or whatever. And so it just made me tear up to see, the mother loving Darrow above the cause. Not that Io was a bad person. I don't think that, but that scene, it got to me a little bit. So I know that your cry count is at least 1 because I walked in on you reading and you were crying. And so
Yes.
give me a live update.
Mine is 2.
Okay.
Mine is also in that scene, but specifically the mom recognizing him, the loneliness he had been feeling, where he didn't feel like he could be seen by his gold friends, and then he's immediately seen by his mom. Granted, I don't know, like she recognizes him, but I don't know if she actually sees him for who he is now by the end of it. But that initial recognition was really moving. And then my second one was Ragnar kneeling before Mustang and being like, take my life if you will.
And he asks her, what do you live for?
Yeah.
Because she's just accused him of living only to fight. And he says, I live for my sisters. I live for my brothers. I live for more now. What do you live for?
Just so moving to challenge someone else's perspective of you in such a true, raw way that is, I mean, I don't think it's that she can't deal with the fact that he's a red. I think it's that she can't deal with the fact that her perspective was just so wrong. Because look at what this obsidian, this stained obsidian, this thing that's not even supposed to be considered human is capable of. He's capable of love of others. He's capable of going against the culture he was taught his entire life and being something more. Truly, truly beautiful moment. It will destroy me if Pierce is like, no, Ragnar's an obsidian, and as such, he can only break the world. I'm really hoping he uses your methodology of he got this I thou from this red gold and can now see others. And because he's experienced the worst of the social and cultural manipulation, he knows that if he can overcome it, anyone can.
Nearer the beginning or middle of the book, Darrow wants to give Tactus another chance to be a good man.
Yeah.
But Lorne, the former Rage Knight, kills Tactus because he's like, no, consequences, and Darrow, people don't change. And Darrow, in conversation with Lorne, he says, men can change. Sometimes they have to fall. Sometimes they have to leap. But before you die, you'll realize it was a mistake to kill Tactus because you never gave him the chance to believe he was a good man. That concept of Darrow I thou'd an obsidian, and the obsidian was able to change. It's kind of like, in Darrow's own words, it's that he gave the obsidian the chance to believe he was a good man. The lesson he didn't get to fully bring out with Tactus, we almost get to see play out with this obsidian. Maybe Darrow's naive, but I think his perspective is people actually can change, but they have to believe something different about themselves. You can almost help give that to them. And it also takes a lot of vulnerability. Ragnar, what he does with Mustang, like he put himself in a very vulnerable situation to the point of being killed. But I think what we're seeing there is it's the vulnerability that can get through to people.
Right.
But you really stick your neck out by being vulnerable. And this is to the extreme, right? But I think it's something you could take and apply in daily life too.
The great question that we're not really answering is, are we going to redeem Jackal? Because you have this story of Darrow just consistently siding with people no one trusts and saying, no, I think there's a human there. I think there's a human there. But Jackal's like the one that he never really believes he can redeem. But I wonder if that's going to be the most important person to redeem. I don't know. I don't know if they're just going to make him just a one-sided villain, if that's Pierce's goal, or if that's actually the person who needs redemption, because we do see him being vulnerable before he kills his father. In some ways, it felt like an extension of the parable of the prodigal son, except the jackal's the one who stays behind the whole time. I think the ultimate test of Darrow's convictions could be turning the jackal.
Could be. I think the jackal is interesting because instead of there just being prejudice to overcome, I feel like there's real mental illness to overcome.
Yeah.
Where his brain just doesn't work like many other people's, and he doesn't seem to feel human emotion the way you would expect people to feel, in a way that not just in like he's been bred to be cruel like Golds, because I think among Golds he's an anomaly too. And what could be an interesting conversation of how far gone is too far gone? Can people who seem too far gone be brought back into a healthy, connected experience with others? So I'll be curious how that story unfolds. And it could be really cool to see Darrow help the jackal change.
Yeah.
But I also think the reality is that some of that has to come from within that person too, like a willingness to, but also a capacity. I think that not everyone's able to overcome the ways that they've been mistreated in the past to be something more in the future, but we shall see.
We shall.
So, moving on to rating.
Yeah, I think similar critique as the first book. I felt a lot happened, but I think from the falling action to right before the cliffhanger, I really enjoyed it. I don't necessarily think I need a book that's so fast-paced, just plot, 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 plot. I really enjoyed the time of reflection that we got to have with Darrow. And there were some characters that I really enjoyed. I would give it a thumbs up, even though I think there were some weaknesses to it, especially around the relegation of side characters to feeling very flat.
Caricatures, almost.
Yeah. It just felt like a lot was happening and that Darrow wasn't responding to those things. He was just doing things. There was a lot of setup for some of the payoffs that I appreciated. So maybe it was worth it, but I felt like you could have condensed a lot of the first half of the book. For him to decide that what we needed was a civil war, it took 100 pages for him to do it. And I don't know, maybe it was necessary, but it just felt like a long time to get started.
Yeah, I agree with you that the last part of this book was the best part. I was pretty fatigued by the constant, like, plot, 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 plot. I mean, it's very fast paced, I guess you could say, but it almost felt like so much was just happening and it was just happening. And we've talked about how there was character growth, but it almost feels swallowed up by just the plot that's happening.
I didn't feel like the character growth really happened until the end.
Yeah.
But you had to set it up.
I don't enjoy reading that style as much as other styles, I suppose. So had the last part of this book not redeemed it for me, this probably would have been a thumbs down for me. It felt like a long book. I mean, sure, a lot happened. It was like fast paced, but it felt long to me. I do want to keep reading, and that's partly why I give it a thumbs up. I think I just wish it was a slightly different writing style or pacing, and maybe a bit more character driven than plot driven. And that's a personal preference, I know. I think some people probably really like this style. And I do think, I mean, we've had some really interesting discussion that some of the ideas in this book sparked. And so I can appreciate that as well. Just that it does make you think about things. So thumbs up, but barely. And I hope that the next book is better. I hope it improves upon this one. But yeah, I guess we didn't really explicitly talk about what we got right versus what we got wrong, and then what we think is going to happen next.
We probably should.
Segment.
Okay. I was right that Io was pregnant.
Yes.
Did you say that as well?
I think we both thought that could be.
It just seemed like an obvious. I was not right that Io and Mustang were the same person.
You weren't.
That was a big wrong. Let's see. I was right that there were more red. Like I thought Titus and Severo were both red at one point.
That was kind of true.
Kind of true.
But Severo didn't know.
Right. So one of my predictions that happened after the last podcast was that Darrow's dad was actually alive. And I thought Darrow's dad was actually Ares and could potentially even be the arch governor if they were all reds or something like that. I was wrong. I was right that it was golds fighting against other golds. And that's where the Sons of Ares were coming from.
At least that the leader of it was a gold.
Right.
Yeah.
You thought it was going to need to be an army of all of them.
That's true. I think that that's coming true. The way that Darrow is trying to empower some of the other colors, the way he gave a razor to the obsidians, and his perspective of doing that is very unpopular with some golds. Like Augustus orders him, you need to cut that out because we will have no gold allies if you behave this way. And this is not how we maintain the society going forward, which is Augustus's goal. So Darrow has to be a little careful. I guess not now because Augustus is dead and he's captured.
You know who's going to rescue Darrow?
Who?
Obsidians with their razors.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like I got that right.
Mustang will help rescue.
Yeah. So that's our prediction going forward, that Mustang will rescue Darrow. You know, I will say one thing I didn't expect going into this book was the time skip at the very beginning. I just was kind of caught off guard by that. So I truly don't know what to expect going into next book. Will it pick up right where we left off, or is it going to have some weird time skip?
How do you time skip if he's about to be dissected?
True.
Yeah, I think one thing that's not a prediction, but I thought it was interesting that happened is he finally got his laurel, his little crown, which he didn't get at the beginning of the first book.
Yes, that's true.
So it's almost like that was the beginning and end of an era, and we're moving on to a completely new era. So I'm excited for that.
Interesting.
The next cover is silver, isn't it?
The next cover has a reaper, and the reaper almost looks like a planet because of its curved form with a sun peeking out from behind
And
it.
it's Morning Star.
Yes.
Do you know what color it is?
It's like a silverish blue reaper and then the golden sun peeking out.
I don't think Pierce spends a lot of time wasting word count. If he plants something, he uses it later, and there's no red herrings. He just uses them all. And one thing that he's used quite a bit is Quicksilver. Like that one silver who is almost gold-like in the way they move about society, but they're still silver. I wonder if they'll be in this next book. That's another prediction I have.
Yeah. I think one thing that's been talked about, Darrow's always thinking about how the golds have no afterlife, but how the reds do, and they have the veil and the old man in the veil or whatever who shepherds them in the afterlife. And he's also the reaper, but then the forbidden song is down in the veil, hear the reaper swing. And I just wonder, I don't think he's going to die and there is going to actually be some afterlife thing, but it's interesting that has been talked about so much. The lack of belief of afterlife for the golds versus the veil and the reaper, and he is the reaper. And so I don't know. I don't really have a prediction fully formed, but I feel more to come on that.
That song is interesting because what if the golds ruled them before they got to the veil, but once they're in the veil, they're free?
Yeah.
I didn't think about it like that the first time through.
It makes me sad that the reds are fed sort of their kind of belief is to hope for the veil and the
For their
afterlife.
death.
And it really reminds me of how Christianity was used with American slaves and how it was hope for your afterlife while we intentionally enslave you in your current life and aren't trying to change that anytime soon.
Yeah.
anything that says just hope for the afterlife. It's just to oppress people.
Yeah.
I think that's all I had.
That's a wrap.
Until next time.
Cue the outro. If you've listened this long, we'll give you a sneak peek on what we're reading next.
Planning to read Theo of Golden next.
Continuing our theme of golden.
Oh, yeah,
Theo
it kind of
Golden.
is.
Do you agree with anything we said? Do you disagree with anything we said? Do you have book requests? Do you have different intro or outro requests? Please leave that in a comment and share this podcast with your friends.
Please and thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Nice.
Nice.